So we once spoke about this, but today I want to go through some primary sources on this idea. We've always bothered with questions. There are 248 mitzvahs aseh, out of which today we only fulfill 60. That the Rambam mentions that at the end in Sefer HaMitzvos, at the end of when he counts the mitzvahs aseh, he makes a list of which mitzvahs do we fulfill today. Basically, everybody. We don't have a Kohen Gadol. We don't have so many things. Barely, it's mamish, like less than a third, actually a fourth, quarter of the mitzvahs. And the obvious problem is all these things are mitzvahs l'doros, and many of them have in it chukas olam l'doros seichem. And you wonder what's it for. Actually, the same thing applies in Parshas Tetzaveh. We just read it, and Big Day Kahuna. Now, if Torah is supposed to be something which is perpetual and real and forever, so why? I'm not a Kohen. I don't know if anybody of you are. I definitely don't plan to be a Kohen Gadol, and so why is it pertinent today for me to read these parshias of the Mishkan, etc.? I mean, the Mishkan Bechlal, for goodness sakes, the Mishkan we're never going to build it again. Now we have the Mikdash. We will have the Mikdash. So why are we even reading Parshas Truma? Etc., etc. Tetzaveh, I'm not planning to make Big Day Kahuna, and I'm not going to be a Kohen. So what's the meaning behind that? I always remind myself of a joke that my father once said. It's in the name of Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, the Rebbe of Satmar. He says, why is he? He says he lived in Hungary for so many years, and not that many people had heart attacks. He comes to America, and so many people have heart attacks. He says, I think I understand what it is. Once upon a time, the whole Torah spread over the whole body of man. 248 organs, 365 tendons and sinews, etc. Gidin. So the weight was shared evenly between the whole body of man. Today, most Jews in America are Jews only in the heart. So you can imagine having a load which is supposed to be carried by the whole body all on the heart. The heart can't stand it. We get heart attacks. The vort is a vort. And the question that stays over here is what does it mean that we have such a big body and very little mitzvahs? Like if they correspond to each other for whatever reason it be, well, that correspondence left a long time ago. What's the meaning of this? That is a serious question. I want to read with you something that I learned in the book Akedas Yitzchak, which is a Rishon, medieval scholar, generation post Ramban. I think it was sent to you. I think you have it in the Akedas Yitzchak. You have it in front of you. Go to the side after the title sheet, and it's underlined. Now look carefully and you will see how much these ideas that we've been discussing will help us. Lavin uladas mehem, to understand and to know from them. To'alota sipurim eila, what is the to'elis, what is the use of all these different stories in the Mikra, which are not really the stories of once upon a time ago. Mishkan, I mean to say the stories of the making of the Mishkan. It's almost 4 parshias. Vakelim, vabgadim, vakarbanot, v'zulatam. Why is this important? The first thing you have to do is have in front of you an issue, safek gadol v'atzum. You have to have in front of you a serious question. Is that Torah? And this is what the question looks like. It is quite known, Torah Torah Hashem Tamima. Our godly Torah is a full Torah. It lacks naught. It's without blemish. And if it's called Torah Hashem Tamima, that lacks naught, and there's nothing superfluous, etc., there shouldn't be any blemish, any something which is lacking. Bisman min azmanim, whatever time it be. This is included when we say it is perpetual, it's forever. This means to say, there can't be anything in the Torah which at any time and for any person will be empty, devoid of any real purpose. As the pasuk says in Chumash, Kilo davar reiku mikem. It's not something which is empty from you. And this condition, this stipulation, the Torah is important and is relevant to every person every time, is demanded for all that learn her. Asher al kol echad mehem, on each and every one of those learners, the pasuk says in Tehillim, Amar Shorer, the poet said, Ki'im b'teres Hashem cheftzai. If a person which wants the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'ya ke'et shatul al palgei mayim, then you will be like a tree which is planted on next to the flowing rivers. Asher yipiryo yiten bi'ito. In every time, that fruit will come forth. V'aleo yilo yibol, and its leaves will not wither ever. Torah has to always give fruit. V'zeh she'u amar yiten apri. What does that mean? The Torah will give fruit. Halimud bi'ito b'chol advarim atluim bizman miyuchad. It's in every time and every place. And even the things which will not leave it, kimo ha'alem ha'etz, as the leaf from the tree, shelo yibol mimenu, it will not wither from it, v'yito yo'il l'tzel o l'trufa. And everything which is done will be successful. One must understand Torah is there to make kol asher yaseh yatzliach. So what exactly is the kol asher yaseh yatzliach? What is the aleh lo yibol? What is the piyo yitem bi'ito? To these parshas of Big Dekuna, v'im zeh mishpat lomdeh hi atzmo lo kol shekain. If this is what everybody learns Torah, this will happen to him. Well, the Torah itself has to be something which is forever. How can we somehow be satisfied or cooled? We can tolerate the idea it doesn't happen anymore. Doesn't mean anything for numbers of people. For example, because it could be a mitzvah for one generation. Making of the Mishkan, the Seder HaKamasai, and how exactly was erected. That's even more weird. Parshas Vayakel. And Pekude Uprikaso, and the idea of how it's dismantled, that's in Parshas Nosai. The Karbanos Chanukas HaNasiim, why do we have to learn the Karbanos of the Chanukah of the Nasiim? Parshas Nosai, Shekulam Nifsika Kavanosam, all of them, their intent is stopped. It was that very temporal, Maida Hava, that which was. That's one. What about mitzvahs of the stories of the past? Why are they important to us? Oh, mitzvot ashelon nistavu behem. What about mitzvahs we were commanded only post us entering to Eretz Yisrael? Ubishas Yeshuva, only when we sat there and lived there. V'kadomet. So what does a person do if he lives in Golus? Doesn't have these mitzvahs. Why is it important to him? Why does that? If Torah has to be for everybody in all places. V'kadomet. What about mitzvahs which are unique for specific types of people? Kigon tarata kohanim v'tumatam minyanim rabim. Kmo ele kfar ne'emar sheyavo bazeh chelukim rabim shelo yu'il l'chol ha'anashim. There's going to be a lot of Torah which is not for everybody. V'gam ma shelo yu'ilem in l'chayre won't even help them. Magam ata. What about now? The yamim rabim. It is a long period. Shegalinu miad masenu. Well, that, thank God, has been remedied to a certain extent. V'shamei migdashenu, but this is still there. Our migdash is still desolate. V'ein lanu lo bayit, v'lo mizbeach, v'lo korban, v'lo kohen she'yechaper be'adenu. So it means to say that these mitzvahs seem to be, at the moment, are not relevant, and that cannot be if this is Teres Hashem Tamima. Hinikal mitzvahs batlu b'avonosenu. Below Nishaba Torah, Ksat mitzvahs, I read at the side here, look at the million of mitzvahs, that it says there's 60 over there. Shem Chayvus Aguf, Vikalahi. Ki'ilu Echem Misefer Zichronot. The Torah almost looks like an ancient novel. It's the memoirs of the fast. Divrei Hayamim, Chronicles, Asher Avru Ba'olam, Zeh Kama V'Kama, that they passed out in the world years ago. So what did Moshe say in Dvarim? Simu levavchem l'chol dvarim asher anochi mitzaveh me'id bechem asher titzavem libneichem lishmor v'la'asot et kol divrei haTorah azot. Kilo davar reiku. That's really in the Pellus. That's not true. Why do I have to teach my children big de kahuna? There are many things which are really only appropriate for numbered people there. Most of Torah is for most of people. That's the pasuk by big de kahuna. Chukas oilam loy lazarei acharav. Goodness sakes, how is it la'olam? It says Lifnei Hashem Tamid. Is that Tamid or Tamid as long as there's a bias? Why does the Torah call it Tamid? Mitzvahs Haneiros, the pasuk says Chukas Oilam L'Dorei Sehem Me'ez Bnei Yisrael. Goodness sakes, it's gone a long time ago. And in the pasuk says in Vayikra, Savas Bnei Yisrael v'Yikrei Lecha v'Amru Chazal. The Gemara says in Kedusha Chavtes, Kol Makom shenemar Tzav miyad u'Ledairos. So, is there a Ledairos of giving Shem and Zayis to Moshe Rabbeinu? He is not Ledairos, and it's all for the Nitzvahs HaMishkan in order to have Shem and Lamar. Why is this Ledairos? It did not continue for all the generations. We're in Gullus, we don't have the bias. What we must deduce from this is all these ideas, the idea of a Mishkan, and the mitzvahs would come on the Mishkan, kulam im shekavanasam I lahayil bahem li'inyana ma'aseh l'anashim yuchadim ahem v'zman hakavah. Although their intent primarily, or first and foremost, is for certain people at a certain time. In a ikar hakavana bahem, what is the primary or principal intent of the mitzvahs? Liotam b'sefer, that they should be written in a book form. V'chokhmah v'limud eloki, it should be godly teachings. Ya'inu bo kol balei haseichel, that all people with intelligence will look into them. V'yaskilu b'yaneim ad, and they will become intelligent with them. They will understand and know all these things in depth. Why? Ad shi'alu b'nafsham b'torat limudim v'iyunim uskalim nisharim b'sichlam. Until they become part and parcel of their personalities, those things are internalized. Now, what does it mean? Kamo shamar, as the pasuk says in Dvarim, you read the Parshas Tetzaveh, what do? Ushmartem et kol divrei abrit azot. You'll heed to all the words of this covenant, which includes the 4 parshas of the Mishkan and the Big de Kahuna and parshas Sefer Vayikra. And what does the pasuk say? Leman taskilo et asher tasun. You should understand, at least in seichel, what was supposed to be done. And I have to know the pirtei halachas of karbanos. I have to know the Pirtei Halachas, the Perik Ezer Mekayma, and that's an important value. Now the question is why. Kashiyadato Omrim, as the pasuk says in Torah, the Gemara Medrash says in Torah's Kainim, that's in Sifra. Ushmartem, the pasuk there says Ushmartem vasitem. Ushmartem is a Mishnah. You have to know the halachas. Vasisem is kimashmoi, literally act upon it. Amar, what does this mean? Kishainu b'divrei abrit azot, when they look into the words of this covenant, it means the Torah. V'yasu otam ba'ofen shelo bilvad yaleh b'yadam ha'maaseh, and they will do it not just in a way that at least you did the mechanical action. Ela shasher yasu yishaer mimenu muskal b'nefesh, but the action will leave remnant of an idea in your personality. Ki hu ha'maaseh shalem. This is the true full action, ha'omed tamid, something which is perpetual. V'lo yasur, will not leave bavur shat ha'maaseh, it won't stop after the action of the ma'aseh. In other words, the tzur v'kiyum in the mitzvahs of Torah is to do the mitzvahs in a way that they, with total understanding of the idea behind it, and thus the actions are nothing more than a way of internalizing ideas. A way of internalizing ideas. This says, this is what he says over here. Ukvar yo'ilu ela masim la'ema chachama yoter misifrei chachmot hachitzonim. By doing that, by living out the values of Torah as described uniquely in every parsha in the Chumash, this will help you internalize, become a certain type of a person, much more than any external books of morals and ethics and so on and so forth. As the pasuk says, "Ushmartem," which is Mishnah. Remember, v'diba v'asitem, and you actually act out and live and do these mitzvos. Kihi chochmaschenu binatchem. That is your book of knowledge and understanding. V'pirsuma ma'ala lehem amar kihem asher yakiru v'yomu. To advertise how special this is what the pasuk says. Rak am chacham v'navon hagoy gadola said that the local Girgashi and Chiti will say, "Wow, you guys really have a very deep Torah." Hine bezosa madrigama maaseh sheyesh bo limud v'chochma. That level of action, which action is coupled together with deep understanding and insight of the purpose of the action, that type of action is what we call ba'yichidim b'chokhmah. Those are those special people who live the world of thought constantly, so they don't just shake the lulav, but the lulav expresses a certain idea, and that's a perpetual idea which helps, as the Rambam writes in Moreh Nevuchim in the second Chalik, as the Ramban quotes, actually again in this week's parsha, specifically this week's parsha. Okay, he actually talks about it. Oh, I was just reading, not in Parshas Vayikra, today I was reading the idea of care of Neter Revai. The halacha is that 3 years there's Orla, and you can't eat the fruit. In the 4th year, you have to take the fruit to Jerusalem. It's called Kodesh Hilulim. It's this is sanctified for praise. Okay? Now, God, I mean, I don't know about you, I don't have an orchard. You know, Zayim bench. The only thing I know about Orla is don't eat it. That's all I know. Okay, why is this important to me? Why is it important to go to Jerusalem and eat it? Today we don't have Jerusalem and we don't have Kedusha in Yerushalayim. Kedusha is Bein HaChomos, they eat it there. So why is it Nagir? Why is it called Kodesh Elulim? So I'm looking at the Ramban, I'm looking at the Rambam, and each one of them brings Taimei HaMitzvos. And they actually explain what the idea behind this is. And every time you refrain from Orla, and every time afterwards you take the K'peirus to Yerushalayim, there's an idea there. Oh, so the idea I can live. I can see the idea when I read the Chumash that constantly knocks on my noggin. It says, Yingala, think about the idea. What this is for. Don't just do it. Don't just think it mechanically. So he says, V'nei bezosa madrigama ma'aseh, asher yesh bo limud v'chokhmah hityachtdu yichidim b'chokhmah. Yes. Those are elite people, special people that live the world of thought in their actions. Omnam, but Haboarim ba'am, those who are totally empty-headed. Bar, ish bar lo yedai, it means an empty-headed person. Empty. Bar, haosim mitzvah betnuetehem, they do mitzvahs just purely mechanical. Mushulelis min kavana mina kavanot aleim. They have no intent at all. They just do it like a Chinese parrot worship. See, at least if they would do it, because I don't know what this is, but it's the will of God, and I'm going to fulfill the will of God. That at least they don't know what they're doing, but at least they know they're fulfilling the will of God. That is a purpose. That makes sense. That's the minimum you do. So he says a person like that, Amar Katuv Ma V'Tihir Atem Oti, Yisrael castigates these people that do things without any sense of religiosity or God awareness. Just purely doing the mitzvahs per se. Mitzvahs Anoshim Melumada, you're doing it like people which do things out of rote. Equals dead, dry bones. There's no life in your mitzvahs. Valehem, it is on these people which do mitzvahs out of rote, purely mechanical, even without that feeling or understanding that I am fulfilling the will of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Kivan Amayra, this is the great teacher, the Rama wrote in Perek Nun Aleph Chelik Gimel. Amar, he said, Shamon Amei Haaretz, the multitude of imperfected people, Haoskim b'mitzvot, they all want to come close to the great king, the Knesset slow, and to walk into his palace. They don't even know where the Beis HaMelech is. Doing the mitzvahs mechanically with no God awareness, it's like you're in the city, you have no clue where the palace is. And you want to enter the palace, you want a relation with God. And the Rama writes over there, you do a mitzvah with your organs. You dug something. Or yachtov, or you were chopping eitzim, trees, min hayar, from the forest, without any clue of why or what you're doing. You don't even know that there's someone which commanded you to do that you're doing because that's what Jews do. You don't know what the intent of this is supposed to be, what the king wants. Don't think you arrived anywhere. That's a pasuk in Yirmiyah. You may be close in your mouth, but you're very far in your innards. You've done the right thing. You have no clue of what you're doing. You're very far in your inner world. If you do the mitzvah with its purpose, that is the perfect way of doing a mitzvah. If you don't do the mitzvah, and you don't think of the b'china of the mitzvah and its tachlis, yodeh, you would admit that we can't deny. Although man may not know the reason of the mitzvah, and its principles, won't have a clue of the philosophical intent and background of the mitzvah. But he does do it with the intent of fulfilling the commandment of the commander of God. At least you can't, you know where the court, where the palace is, and you can't enter the palace. You may not get to the throne room, but at least you're walking in because you're living with, at least with the God awareness of Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. Umakir pnei hamelech hamitzaveh. So, and you recognize who this king is because you're there to fulfill his will. Okay, therefore, omnam, but flipping the page. But those people who live with chachma al derech shamanu, that they do things not just because it's fulfilling the will of God, but living with the intent of God, how this will perfect and make you a better person. For these people, these mitzvahs are perpetual and forever. Kol mitzvah zot Torah u'prinatam yavo ziruzam miyad l'dorot. There's no difference. You finish the mitzvah is constantly doing things for you. And he goes on, it starts the whole Shar Nun Aleph, explaining the ideas that we learned from the Biyana Mishkan, from the Kalim, from the Bidei Kahuna. And this he comes and he says. He gives an example. I'm skipping a few lines. He's going down, for example, the mitzvahs of the Korban. And he says, if you look at the underlined lines of Kamosha Amar David Zivche Elokim, Ruach Nishbara, Lev Nishbar, V'nidke Elokim Le'tivse. If the intent of a korbanos is to somehow experience a broken heart, and that's the real korban, well, you don't have the korban, you don't have the tool to facilitate that, but you can work on having a broken heart when you sin. Once we know that the intent of Zivche Elokim, of Karbanis Huliot, Nizovech Ruach Nishbar Lefanav, you should have a broken heart, and you look at the animal and you say, well, my animal instincts also must be cut away and sacrificed. And I have to take the basic, the better part of my animal instincts, the chaylev, the fatty part, and dafka that give up and bring it to God. It's called giving up batal ritzoncha b'fnei ritzonai, and understanding that a chait means to say that I have to take my nefesh habahamis, my animal instincts, and sacrifice it and take it and give up on it. If you understand that, the leiv nishbar v'linke elokim leitivzeh, hine yadanu ki haleiv nishbar v'nidke af ki yeh b'li korban k'mei b'zman she'ein beis hamikdash kaim elokim leitivzeh. That's also like a korban. It says this is the pshat, the parshas of Kabbanis, Sharnun Zayin Yizbaru Imai. There I will explain it at length. Od psukim esmuchim elav. This is an unbelievable book, by the way. Huatzmo mashamru chazal. This is an important piece. The Gemara says in Menachas Seis Tyrus Ha'ila Kala Isik B'Tyrus Ha'ila Ki'ila Ikriv Ha'ila. And people think you're going to say Ezim Mekayman, or you say the psukim of the Chumash. It's as if you're a makav a korban. That's a joke. What does it mean? This is what it you sacrifice. And what does this mean? Just as the action of this karbanos will help facilitate this idea of internalizing the idea of a leiv, nishbar, v'nidke, of giving up the fat of life for the true purposes, and to put it face to face with your thought process, to internalize and understand it. This honorable idea, which that is the straightforward intent of this mitzvah. Pen yo'ila mikra lalomed l'mayem guli safek v'chein hu ra'el b'chol ha'masim ha'toreim. That is what it means. Kol ha'osim b'teres oila. Kol ha'osim b'teres oila means into the chelik ha'yuni. And shall we say, if you can't do the mitzvah and pshat, so the remez, the drush, the sod, the tamei mitzvahs, the reasoning behind the mitzvahs, still have to be there. And if you do that, so even when you can't do the mitzvah, you still have the tamei mitzvahs behind it, and that's what you're supposed to fulfill. If God took away the capability of having the mitzvah person, the external mitzvah, what he's saying is you guys have been doing it too externally. Now, will you please focus on the intent? Fulfill the mitzvah in the way for its purpose. Ultimately, you do it enough that way, it'll come back. You don't have Shemitah and Yovel in Chutz La'aretz. Even we only have a D'Rabbanan, and we don't have Yovel. But if you go into the understanding of Shemitah and Yovel, that means the Li Kol Ha'aretz, that everything I make comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the idea is that ownership is temporal, and really you should be a vehicle of expressing God's ownership. And that's why you're giving tzedakah. You're not giving tzedakah from yours. God says, Liya Kesef, Liya Zav. God owns the money. And Lamai, you're the Shemer Pikot, and there's some people which God gives money directly to, and some things which God gives you money to be the Shemer Pikot, and to give to the person who's supposed to get it, the Oni. So when a person gives tzedakah, what's he doing? That money is Maisi, you're a Shemer Pikot. if you would live that way and think that way and feel that way, not just for a rabbi's sermon, that's the toelas of Shemitah and that's the toelas of Yovel. So you can live Shemitah and Yovel in Los Angeles, in Seattle, I don't know where, in Hawaii. The pshat, the remez, drish, and sight of Shemitah can be fulfilled everywhere and always. The pshat depends on where and where we are. You can equate this idea to all Torah actions. You will receive the te'elis in those mitzvahs. This is why it's so important to try to understand Tamei mitzvahs in Rambam or in Ramban, or if you want to read this book, which is unbelievable, which is much harder to read. I think there's an English translation today of it, by the way. It's a phenomenal book. All these things, lo namar, we will not say, never say, oh, I missed that. It was better then we had X. If you learn Torah and do Torah this way, of seeing constantly the purpose in the action, kli umnus biyadenu. This is our working tool. Lachin lefanenu zaderech hanochai, to prepare the route for ourselves. And the eyes, Nia Kelokim, will be like great people, Anhiga Olam L'Talteinu, to lead the world to the way it should be, to where we should be going. La'nasenu L'Tayv Lanu Kol Hayam, he's quoting a passing V'eschanan, and this will make existence good. La'chesenu B'chol HaMakomos U'B'chol HaZmanim. So here you have this unbelievable idea. I quoted multitudes of times, but I never read it inside, and I think the time has come to see it. Yes. Kiyum mitzvahs demands what you say, moach v'leiv, and ma'isa. It's not just chayvus ha'evarim, it's also chayvus ha'lavavos, it's also chayvus ha'askala. Every mitzvah and every license that you refrain from demands you not to think what not to do, but why not to do, or what this teaches me and how this makes me a better person. Rambam says this very clearly also before the last and the third volume of the guide, that you want to get your Shemayim, obviously you have to be Mekayim the loisases, refraining in front of God and everything. Understand, I want you to refrain from this because of that. I want you to refrain from this because of that, and so on and so forth. You understand, you internalize, you're refraining because God says this is the wrong thing to do. And mitzvahs, aseh, are things which generate God awareness and ultimately drives you to want to be closer to God, and they create i'avas Hashem. That's what he writes. Can you imagine every time you do a mitzvah say this is something which helps you, inches you further ahead to Avos Hashem? That is only if you do the mitzvahs the way the Rambam told us to do the mitzvahs, the way the Ramban tells us to do the mitzvahs, the way Balaked. I'm trying to say this is really normative Judaism. That's what I'm trying to say. Just Nebuchadnezzar, people are not norm. Well, it's not normative Judaism, whatever they are. It's not Judaism the way the medievals understood it. Let's leave it at that. Okay, this is reform. So now I'm looking at this and I say to myself, again, this means to say that Amalek must be something which I have to somehow hate, and I have to somehow want to eradicate. And I've mentioned this a multitude of times. I'm sure today, you know, what they would do if they would find some good Amaleki with a hechsher of the badats. You know, otherwise there'd be a machlokus, is he or is he not. They probably go to what's it called, Met Field, where they have the Siyam Mashas, okay? And they'll have Chesed Shmuel Kamenetsky slice the guy's throat, and they'll also Yamim Al Yemei Melech Taisef. I can see it now. That's not what we're talking about. Honestly, I don't want that to happen. I'm scared. It hurts me. I can't read. I have a hard time dealing with. You know what I want? We can all fulfill Michias Amalek by understanding what Amalek is. And here there's a big problem. Multitudes of peoples have told me or written or printed all over the world, what is Amalek? And they all, I hate to say it, it's like saying svars coming out of their bellies. It depends which breakfast they ate before they decided what Amalek is. In all truth, there's an acid test to know what Amalek is. Just as the Gra writes And this is found in the Akdama of the Pas HaShulchan. The Pas HaShulchan was a Talmud Muvik, the Gra. He sat by him for 14 years, God. Rabbi Yisrael of Shklov was of the founders of the Ashkenazi Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael. One of the big Talmidei Agra, which came with the encouragement of the Gra to Eretz Yisrael. He lived in Tzfat, and afterwards in Jerusalem, then went to Tzfat. He has a book, Pa'asa Shulchan, which is all on Hilchas HaTluyos Ba'aretz. Very famous book. Anybody who learns Zeraim uses it as his handbook. So he writes in his Akdama about the Gra, he says that in order to know the truth of Torah, you must know both the Pshat and the Remez and the Drush and the Side. He says, why? Because the truth of Torah doesn't change. If the Pshat fits neatly with the Remez, and the Remez fits perfectly as an external husk of the Drush, and the Drush fits perfectly as an external husk of the Side, that's emes of Torah. The only acid test you know what an emes of Torah is if the Pshat fits into the Remez and the Remez and the Drush and the Drush and the Side. For anybody who doesn't have the four darkness of Gila, of the Isis of understanding Torah, he can do his best, but you can't really say that's emes of Torah. Right, so over there, the Gra had this, and therefore every time he said a svara, a tikkun of a girsa, it all fit with all levels. That's what he writes about the Gra. Unbelievable. You know, it's frightening to think about it. The pardes of Torah is one. So I say this because the acid test of understanding Amalek, we can't make things up because our belly says so. It has to fit. The pshat has to fit with the remez has to fit with the drush, and the drush has to fit with the side. You can't tell me the side of Amalek is X, Y, and Z if this doesn't somehow fit with the pshat of Torah. And the pshat of Torah says that if I see a 1-day-old Amaleki, I have to slice its throat. So when people come and tell me, Amalek is any nation which wants to eradicate the Jews, this is a terrible statement. Does anybody think that one has to take the typical German boy in the time and slice his throat when he's 1-day-old? God help me. How can you possibly say that Amalek is any nation which wants to eradicate the Jews? It's terrible. That's against the pshat. And you're saying a drasha when the Torah says that's not what I mean. You're sticking your two muddy feet into the idea of Torah Hashem. This is horrendous. This is a terrible thing. And that's what I hear so many people saying. Yes, this is the idea of a nation which wants to destroy the Jews. And then they somehow attach it to the Germans. And then they decide to attach it to Stalin. And then finally they try to attach it, I don't know, to the Hamas. It's all sweet. I didn't know the Allah is that we're supposed to take the local kid in Gaza and slit his throat. So this has nothing to do with it. I'm saying this for a purpose because it's common and rampant in our society to repeat this. I heard this when I was a kid from great people. And I say today, I revolt again. I say it's terrible. It should not be said. How can you say, call this Torah, Chalila v'chas? You have to know the side of Amalek and ultimately therefore say, maybe this is what it is, Alpi side. And what does it mean to slice the throat of a 1-year kid, Alpi side? And then you can explain what is the idea of Amalek. You have to hear, if you want to be, or you like the Rambam, I know the intent of this mitzvah. And these halachas are expressed in a certain fashion in the intent of this mitzvah. Then it makes sense. But if the idea of the pirtei mitzvah don't fit into your beautiful theory, chalila v'chas. So therefore, what is Amalek? And that's the question I'm asking, because as we all know, the Sefer HaMitzvahs, the mitzvah says, this Shabbos you all heard a pep talk about destroying Amalek. And that was the reason of why Shmuel gave this big pep talk in the Haftorah to Shaul before. Rambam says in Sefer HaMitzvahs, in order to waken up the Sina of Amalek, that he should be so venomously hateful about Amalek that she wanted to destroy him totally. And that's what we did not fulfill this Shabbos. None of us were Mekayim the mitzvah of Schiras Amalek Al Pi Din. We went to shul. We did what all Jews do for the because God says so. But God says the purpose of this mitzvah is to generate and fan the flames of hatred, venomous hatred, to the extent that if you would see one, you would want to kill him. You would want to destroy it. His existence disturbs you to the extent you want its eradication. You might not have the guts to kill it, but you want them dead. Literally, when I remember as a kid, one of my classmates was angry at me, so he says, "Drop dead." Says Jack, "You don't want me to die. You're gonna have to go to a funeral." So says, "No, don't mean drop dead. I mean stop nudging me." Okay, that's something else. Yeah, with Amalek, I have to say drop dead. I mean it. You know what I mean? I can't even do that. That's the honest truth. So what does it mean in this? I once learned with you a letter of the Ramchal, which describes this phenomenon. I'm going to skip it now because this is it's already late. I'm going to tell you what he writes. He writes over there that all punishment of a Kadosh Baruch Hu is mida keneged mida, as the mabit, right? The mabit is the Rabbi Yosef Mitrani. He is the counterpart of the Beis Yosef. He was the rabbi of Tzfat. He was the counterpart of the Beis Yosef at the time. The Tzfat, one of his Balabatim was the Beis Yosef, and he was the Rav. There's a lot of discussion between them. He has a Sefer Shelos and Shuvas Hamabit, Reb Moshe Mitrani, and the Beis Yosef Sefer Shuvas is called Avkat Rochel, the peddler's dust. By the way, very interesting name of a book. Call your book The Peddler's Dust. Okay, so he's got Peddler's Dust, and he has the book, The Chuvas of the Response of He Who Looks and Sees. Mabit is someone that sees. It is the response of the seer versus the peddler. And this is the Mabit and the Beis Yosef. So the Mabit has a book on religion called Beis Elokim, the house of the Lord. It's a tremendous sefer. So in the Mabit, right, writes over there, he discusses the idea how every time you have a Yisurim, you have to check with that aver, with that organ, how you behaved yourself with it. Ad kedekah, because Yisurim are there, mida keneged mida. And if you have a toothache, start thinking, what is a toothache first and foremost physically? And think, well, how have you used your teeth lately? Now, teeth are used for speech. Teeth are there for food, for grinding food. Whatever teeth are for, if you have a toothache or an abscess in your teeth, start asking, what did you do with your teeth? Imamish makes a list of things and possibilities. It's an unbelievable thing. Once again, these are one of those books which are too direct. Many people don't want to see them. But then he pinpoints it's a hard thing. So Misurim is there for rectification. That's what it's for. If I have problems in my joints, okay, I can't just say old age. It means to say, you walk somewhere you shouldn't have. You use your joints in a way you shouldn't. Whether you were becoming a zakufa, whether you were overwhelming people, whether you were going to places you shouldn't have gone. And so you have to start thinking that way. That's what the Mabit writes. It's an important musar, not just for Elul and not just for Rosh Hashanah, but this goes on for 24/7, 365. So he asked the question, the Ramchal, so why is that God took away the capability of doing mitzvahs? We have that mafurish in a Rashba and Ein Yaakov on the Medrash of Kol HaMoedim B'Telim, all the Moedim will be batel, so to speak, except for Purim. So the Rashba says it doesn't mean that they'll be annulled legally. It means there's going to be times in history where God won't allow us to fulfill those mitzvahs. Call it Moedim B'Telim, so the Rashba, there's going to come when God's going to say, sorry, guys, I don't want your mitzvahs. So what's God saying when he says, I don't want your mitzvahs? I remember discussing this when COVID was around. And I was asking, what does God want from us? That he wants us to close the shuls and close the yeshivas and everyone should sit and learn on his own. What does God want from me now when I have to go when I was in Keren B'Yavne, I had to say shir, the boys were learning in the Miklat today. In the King David Miklat, that's why I said shir, that's where the guys were learning. When I was there in the morning, there were 4 azakot, 4 siren, yeah. What does God want? Well, first of all, as I said before, the Gemara said that the Ramim and Barakim, thunder and lightning, are there to straighten out the crooked parts of your emotion, to wake you up. So it says sometimes God doesn't, it's not enough just to have natural thunder and lightning. Some he adds other things to it. It's called sirens. But the truth of the matter is, I said to them, remember, the pasuk says, Imbechu koisei teilechu. Rashi says, Tiya melim b'Torah, then I'll be natati shalom ba'aretz. And if there's no shalom ba'aretz, that means somebody who's supposed to be amol b'Torah at this stage is not being amol b'Torah. We have to, all the ishtadlus to have shalom ba'aretz, we have to serve in the army, but you also have to be amol b'Torah. You can't do one without the other. You can't be amol b'Torah without having an army. You can't have an army without amol b'Torah. Amol b'Torah means thinking, breaking your back on it. And so this is for young bachim. That's your job. Your job is now, you're not in the army. You now have to sit down and break your backs and learn like as much as possible. So this is the idea of a mitzvah. And God takes away the mitzvah of Mechias Amalek, that means to say, I'm taking you so far from it culturally. The only thing you have left is try to find what's its drush, remes, and soid, and try to connect to that. And then maybe I'll bring it back to you one day. But first and foremost, what is the soid of Amalek? So I'm going to read with you again something we once read in the past. In the Derech Mitzvah Secha, you have it in front of you, Mitzvah Schiras V'chias Amalek. It starts with page Shadik Daled, the last paragraph. Hine lohavin atam, one has to understand the reason. Lama ichnisa kadosh baruch hu atzmo l'tagaze. Why did God get involved in this rumble? Kol kach, so angry, so wants to destroy. Mashalo asaken l'shum umno mitzarenu. We have no other nation which afflicted us. That God is so angry, he says, my throne will not be full until this one is eradicated. And he's forewarned us that we must do this mitzvah. We also have to understand the Maimer Chazal. Ein Hashem Shalem, ve'ein HaKisei Shalem, ad she'yimachez haro shel Amalek. This is a Medrash Tanchum Parshas Kisei. Let's try to understand what those words mean. Ein Hashem Shalem, the name of God is not full. What do you mean it's not full? Which name of God is not full? The name of God is a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. I see it all over the place. What do you mean it's not full? What does it mean, Ein HaKisei Shalom, the throne of God? I don't know what throne of God means. What do you think it means? It's not full. It's rickety. It's got 2 feet instead of 4. And so to speak, the Shem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu also has 2 letters, and the other 2 are, so to speak, cut away from the first 2. What does it mean? So let me tell you what it means. When we talk about Kisei, Kadosh Baruch Hu, that's a pasuk in Yecheskel and Yeshayahu. The God sits on his Kisei, which is a metaphor of God acting as a reigning sovereign. Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'saken olam b'malchus shakai, v'chor b'nei basar, etc. Yakir v'yedu, ki l'chos sichrach u'berach tishavach ha'lashon. We vividly feel and understand that there's one sovereign of everything. That's called the Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The shame of Yud Kei Vav Kei is understood if you look carefully at the letters and if you know the symbolism of letters. We can understand what this teaches us. The idea of Yud Kei Vav Kei, as the Ramban writes in Parshas Yisrael, is this is the name of God, which is the Melech. He says on the pasuk, "Anochi Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokecha." Understanding Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokecha, it's called Kabbalas Oil Malchus Shamayim. realizing that he is Yud Kei Vav Kei, that is Kabbalah's Ol Malchus Shamayim. What is the Yud Kei Vav Kei? Well, first of all, the broad word Yud Kei Vav Kei, as the Ramban says, primary source of all. And everything is nothing more than a derivative, an expression, rather, of his will and his omnipotence, his capabilities. Try living that way. The more you really think about that, then you're an Eved Hashem and you're Mekabel Ol Malchus Shamayim. You look in the mirror and you say, I am nothing more than an expression of God's wisdom and God's will. That's what I am. And then he goes on and says, well, let's understand how this fits in the letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud. Yud in the Medrash of Rebbe Akiva, which is a Medrash on the Osios. We found it in the Geniza. We have two versions of it. Indicates the smallest letter in the Hebrew alphabet. It is parallel to what we would call mathematical point. The beginnings of everything. That's what we call Chachma. If you ever see the Shir Bar Yochai, so there's a stanza there, Yud Chachma Keduma. The supernal source of all wisdom, that's Yud. You know what a Hey is? A Hey is taking that idea, that Yud, and giving it a tangible framework. You know, the Dal is like a box, is like a framework that Yud spreads into, it's like mathematical point, develops into lines, and ultimately into space or dimensions. And that's a Mefurish Gemara Menachos, that Hey is the idea of this Yud, Kibikah, Yud Shem Tzur Lamim, the Olam HaElyon, the supernal world of thought, is created with the letter Yud, and the world here of tangible reality was created with Hey. This world is created with Hey. Why? Because this is an external expression of that Yud. That's what it is. It is God of wisdom. Well, you know what it is for us? If you understand, you get in a piece of information, and then you give it imagery in your mind, you understand it. Yud is Chachma, Hey is Bina. Lavin Davar, you're capable of translating it, extrapolating it. You've interned, that's very special. There's knowing and there's understanding. To understand something, you notice use tools of tangibility to make it vivid and real to you. You then take that Yud that you not only know, but you comprehend and understand, and then you have to translate it into how you interact with the world around you. And that's taking the Yud and extending the leg of the Yud, making it look like a hook, and that's a Vav. Now you connect with the world around you, with people, through that world of ideas which you understood. You translated that Yud after you gave it texture into a world of feelings, of philosophies of life, how to deal with things, a perspective, how you deal with things. And then finally, there's another Hey. After you have a value system based on that original Yud, which you understood, of how to interact with reality, the practical reality of actually realizing those feelings. So one would say Chachma, Bina, your midos, and ultimately the action, all that whole Chachma and the whole Bina and that whole midos are translated how you talk, how you think, how you interact, what you do. Is your body functioning as nothing more than an external expression of an understanding and of a feeling which is based on the Chachma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. The Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be realized when all of existence will live that way. When we will all of creation will actually say, I am nothing more than a Nivra of a Hoive Kadma in Shemimenu HaKol B'Chefetz V'Yacholet, I have nothing more than his agenda, and I'm a vehicle of his agenda, and that's what I do with my mouth, with my kidneys, with my bakolat smaisei temanu Hashem bikamoicha. That's the malchus of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. When our private yud is translated in our private hey, in our private vav, and ultimately in our private hey. You know, the Baal Shem Tov once said, when you give tzedakah, you should be mechaven the Shem Yud Ke Vav Ke. He says the coin in your hand, that's the Yud. The palm which holds it is the first Hey. The extended hand, that's your Vav. Putting it into his hand, that's the last Hey. Realizing an idea, that's it. So he says basically, Ein Hashem Shalem, the Malchus of Kadosh Baruch Hu will never be realized. Why? Because Amalek doesn't mind if you are a cerebral Jew and a practicing Jew. You can believe in all the philosophies and all the Chassidish Vertalach and all this, you learn the Chassidus and Kabbalah, but you say this has nothing to do with practical reality. That's up in the world of theory. As long as you don't think that you can actually live that way, you can only see it as an important ideas and disciplines, but it doesn't actually translate itself into your day-to-day thinking, speaking, and reality. You have cut away the first two letters from the last two letters. You've put God up in the heavens and said he is not going to have a residence in this world of action. You say, I don't mind the cerebral chachma and bina of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but my midas should become midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and ultimately my maisa should reflect those midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nah, forget it. It ain't happening. That's not going to happen. That's what it says, Ein Hashem Shalem ve'ein Kisei Shalem. The real purpose of existence is to translate the world of not ideas into thought, into understandings, understandings into feelings, and feelings into action. Lo medrash ikar ela ma'isa. If there's something in our society which basically is very cynical and won't allow me, it gives it very difficult for me to actually decide I am going to live that way, not just read about it. I'm going to read all these unbelievable ideas found in Mer Nevuchim and Ramban and the Sefer HaKedah, but I'm not going to try. It's not. I give up. It's not palatable. It's not going to happen. That means Amalek won, because what Amalek is, as described over here, and this page in Derech Mitzvah, look at the last line. Amalek chava bishahu lagabeu di Yisrael. Amalek is an evil animal for Jews. The common layout parsha is orchin. It hides itself at strategic corners. Tichsiv, as the pasuk says, Ashesam loy baderech ba'aloisim b'Mitzrayim. He hid and ambushed us when we left Egypt. V'muvam midvarav. And the idea of the Zohar is she'ikra akpeda al Amalek. Why is God angry at Amalek? V'she'orav liYisrael pashas drachim, that he saw us being ambushes the Jew at junctions. Menachem is Zechut, and the Migdash Melech. These are different Talmidim of the Ari explain. Sha'inyan ki Amalek udas the Klippa is the understanding of things in an external way and not letting internal thought come down. The alternative way of seeing things superficially and not in depth. Lacking intellectual truth, lacking to bring your bina into your midos. Umekomo keneged das the ben ketvin de kedusha. Just as what is das? Das is the capability of taking chachma and bina and translating into feelings and midos. We discussed that multitudes of times. There is the alternative. The alternative, not letting das come in, is called cynicism. You give up before you start and you don't think it can happen. That's Amalek. That's the side of Amalek, as we know, not from some rabbinical speech, but from the Zohar HaKadosh, from the Talmidei Ari. That's bona fide primary source. That's Amalek. Amalek is that which any culture which puts in itself the idea of cynicism against any religion. It's the Western society that I live in today in the world of academia, where religion isn't challenged, religion is ridiculed. The idea of talking about intelligent design may actually make sense, but it'll be ridiculed in the halls of academia because somehow people are afraid you'll fall from there into an idea of having morals and ethics prescribed by some entity outside of humanity. So it's ridiculed before you start. We are cynical, Judaism. The kids come back from Israel, the first thing the kids will tell them, hey, have you flipped out? Are you frummed or something like that? You know, there's different words for that. Why aren't you going to Cornell? Why are you wasting time at YU? It's all there. It's cynicism towards real religiosity. And sometimes it works in different ways. Sometimes it makes you go to extremes to act like an idiot in order for you to be ridiculed and ultimately be ashamed of yourself. That's also Amalek. There are different ways of making you laugh at yourself. Either people laughing at you or acting as an idiot, and then you're going to end up laughing at yourself. It's called lack of natural flow from Chokhmah to Bina to Das. It's taking away the Das and bringing in that which makes it impossible, whether it's cynicism or whether it's tipshus. All of a sudden, these kids come, they got peolach and they're wearing tchelis and the tzitzis out. Put your shirt in, act like a normal human being. No, all of a sudden, they're acting like a who knows what happens. Then they come home and mommy says, stop and shave. You know what I mean? And then the next thing I know, they gave up everything and they're dating some shiksa. And I'm talking from experience, okay? This is all Amalek. Amalek is that which is in our Western culture, which should do whatever it takes to make sure you don't grow up as a mature, thinking, internal, God-aware Jew. That's something you can, I hate. If there's anything I pray for its eradication, and I'm almost like Don Quixote fighting windmills, trying to at least limit the effect of that, that's fighting Amalek. So if you want to celebrate anything on this Purim, celebrate your successes against that cynicism. Celebrate the fact that you're capable of trying your best and really want to be a real Jew, and not going to extremes which actually make you feel foolish, or not caring about that fellow says, hey, what you doing with your life? I will never forget that person that told that to me. Okay? You know? And that's Mechias Amalek. So celebrate your successes, celebrate your children's successes, and actually be angry at the fact that other things that didn't make them success more. Be angry. Pray for that to stop. That would be your kiyum of the soid, as brought down in Zohar of Mechias. That you can hate. I can say honestly, I hate that. I really wish this would be destroyed. And if hypothetically there would be one day a nation which embodied this total cynicism, I don't know if I could actually go and do what God wants me to do. I guess I'd have to, but I don't know how I would do it. But thank God at the moment he doesn't tell me to do that. So he's telling me do the pshat, do the remez drushan side of Amalek, because I don't have the pshat. I'm not saying on this one yet. You know what I mean? I'm not waiting for it to happen. Okay? Because I think first I have to fix the inner world of Amalek before I can engage in that. That's like it's postgraduate. Not there yet. Have a meaningful Purim. That's what it's about. Just remember what Rav Hutner always told me. Chai V'Adam L'Psuma B'Pura Ad L'Yod says you have to have 1,000 tons of das to give up a bit of it on Purim. If you don't have 1,000 tons, don't squander. Phil, I mean you. Tell Ari. Call too. Bye. Good young.
Thank you, Rebbe. Thank you, Rebbe.